Welcome back to my channel on language and linguistics learning. In this video, I show you the use of SFL-based metaphor or systemic functional linguistics-based metaphor in writing English scientific texts. Now, before talking about the SFL-based metaphor, let's consider the two clauses. He doesn't attend the lecture because he is sick, and the second one, his absence from the lecture is caused by his illness. Now, in your opinion, which of these two clauses is common in your everyday communication? Well, I believe that most of you here agree to say that the first clause is common in our everyday communication. Why? Because that is the usual way or the common way to say the meaning that contains in that clause. He doesn't attend the lecture because he's sick. Instead of saying his absence from the lecture is caused by his illness. Okay, now, when you see that the first clause is common, it means that that is the congruent form of language. And the congruent form of language is one of the characteristics of spoken or oral language. Now, let's see further the classification of language into oral and written language. Oral is spoken language, the language which is spoken. And oral language is characterized by the language that we use in our everyday communication, in our everyday interaction. We use oral language because the main function here is to make our message understood by our listener. So we use as simple expression as possible. And the second one is written language. Written language, of course, the language which is used in writing, especially in writing scientific articles, books, newspapers, magazines, and other written media. But the problem, especially faced by non-native speakers of English, is that they use spoken language in written text. Okay, we use spoken language in written text. Therefore, in order to solve this problem, I offer you the SFL-based metaphor. Now, in order to make or in order to construct an SFL-based metaphor, we have to know the characteristics of English written language. Based on the experts, you see that written language is characterized by the first one, incongruent form or incongruence. Okay, incongruence means uncommon. It means that the language we use, the structure we use is not common. The second one is impersonality. There's a tendency to use a passive form instead of an active form. For example, when you want to write, the writer limits the problem in this thesis to blah, blah, blah. Instead of writing such a clause, you are suggested to write the problem of this thesis is limited to blah, 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 blah. So we don't show the person because everybody knows that the one who limits the problem must be the writer. So instead of saying the writer limits the problem, it will be much better if you write the problem of this thesis is limited to. The next one is lexical density. In other words, you have many lexical items in one clause, or the clause is dense. And the last one is condensed clause. Okay, your clause is condense. Your clause contains many lexical items. Okay, so these are the four characteristics of English written language. Now, in order to achieve that goal, in order to write an English scientific text based on the characteristics of English written language, I introduce you to SFL-based metaphor. In other words, I can say that SFL-based metaphor can be used as a means to write a good English text. Now, let's see the difference between congruent and metaphor. Okay, the difference between congruent form and a metaphorical form. The congruent form is characterized by the congruent function, okay, by the ordinary function of a lexical item. Let's say nouns occupy nominal functions, verbs occupy verbal functions, and also adverbs occupy adverbial functions, such as in clause, a large quantity of protests came in following the announcement. This is, the congruent form. When we change or convert this clause into the metaphorical form, so the result is this: a flood of protest poured in following the announcement. You see, we use the lexical flood instead of large quantity. And then came, okay, is it changed by the use port. And, this is not common. This is not our common way to say the meaning of this clause in our everyday communication. Now, metaphor or SFL-based metaphor is going to change the ordinary function of each of lexical items. And one of the ways to change the ordinary function of the lexical items is by nominalization. So in this video, I'm showing you how to construct metaphorical clauses by using nominalization. What is nominalization? Nominalization means we form nouns from verbs, from adjectives or adverbs. Okay, that is the meaning of nominalization. Forming nouns from the lexical items which didn't used to be a noun. Okay, that is nominalization. Now, I'm offering you here in this video. I offer you 6 steps, okay, of nominalization process. The first step is identify the clauses used in a clause complex. In other words, you have to look at carefully the clauses used in a clause complex. The second one, you need to separate the clauses. You need to divide the clause complex into several clauses that build the clause complex. And it will be much better if you number the clauses. Clause number 1, clause number 2, 3, and so on. And the third step is change each of the clauses into phrases. Okay? Change each of the clauses into phrases. I'll give you an example later. The next one is pay more attention to the verbs. Why? Because they are the core of the clauses. In the SFL terminology, I can say that pay more attention to the processes, okay, to the processes of the classes. Why? Because they are the core of the classes. And based on them, the number of classes depends. The fifth one, arrange the phrases that have been nominalized into a complete sentence based on their logical relations. And the last one, read the sentence again and give correction whenever necessary. If you think that several corrections are needed, just add. Okay, that is the last step in nominalization process in order to form a metaphorical clause. Now, let's see an example. Now, study the clause. They were selected as the research participants because they had 10 years of experience as professional translators, although they were not familiar with the use of translog. Now, after careful reading of this clause, let's divide the clause into several clauses. Now we have three clauses. The first one, they were selected as the research participants. The second one, they had 10 years of experience as professional translators. And the third one is they were not familiar with the use of translog. After we divide the clause complex into several clauses and we convert or we change these clauses into phrases forms or into phrases. So, for example, they were selected as the research participants, and then we nominalize this clause by writing their status as the research participant. You should not eliminate the meaning contained in the congruent form, but instead you keep the meaning, but you say it in the other form. So the clause they were selected as the research participants has the same meaning with the phrase their status as the research participant. And the second clause, they had 10 years of experience as professional translators, is changed into the phrase their 10 years of experience as professional translators. And the last one, they were not familiar with the use of translog, is changed into their unfamiliarity with the use of translog. Now, when we consider this clause complex, you see that the relation, the logical relation among the clauses here is called um, hypothetic relation. Okay, hypothetic relation. Therefore, we use alpha and we use beta. And we use here multiple because you know that uh, A here is extended, sorry, alpha here is extended by beta. So this one, yeah, when we use here the multiple mark, we say this as, you know, extension. So the paratactic relation is called extension. And that's also happened, okay, in the next clause. We also have alpha, which is extended by beta. Now, we focus on these phrases, okay? After we change the clauses into phrases, and then we arrange the phrases into a complete sentence by considering the logical relation among the phrases or among the elements of the clause complex. Now we can write their status as the research participants was caused by their 10 years of experience as professional translators despite their unfamiliarity with the use of translog. So you can see that we have here many clauses, but we have exactly only one clause here. Okay, so their status as the research participants was caused by their 10 years of experience as professional translators, despite their unfamiliarity with the use of translate. We can say that this clause is simple. This clause only has one process, that is, was caused. Okay, we don't have any conjunctions here. We don't have any connectives here. We exactly have only one process. And uh, the result or this clause can be described as X was caused by Y. This is actually the structure of a clause that I propose to be used in writing research articles or in writing scientific articles or in writing scientific books and whatsoever. So X was caused by Y. X here represents their status as the research participants. Meanwhile, Y here represents their 10 years of experience as professional translators, despite their unfamiliarity with the use of translate. So you can use this structure to create thousands or even millions of clauses. We have very simple clause. Okay, you only fill in, okay, the elements of X and you fill in the element of Y if the logical relation shows cause and effect relationship. That's actually my goal to propose the SFL-based metaphor in writing. So you only focus on the idea, okay? The idea that you want to fill in the X and the idea you want to fill in the Y, okay? Now, when we calculate the lexical density of, the metaphorical clause, their status as the research participants was caused by their 10 years of experience as professional translators, despite their unfamiliarity with the use of translate. We have this result. So you see the congruent form, okay, the congruent form or the form before it is changed into the metaphorical form, we have three classes. Okay, we have three clauses, and we have here 18 lexical items. However, in the metaphorical clause, we only have one clause. So we have more dense clause. And then we have here 15 lexical items. Now, when we use the formula to calculate or to count the lexical density, we divide the number of lexical items with the number of the clauses. So 18 divided by 3 equals 6. It means that we have only 6 lexical items in one clause compared to the metaphorical clause. So we have here 15 lexical items in one clause. And you see that the clause is very dense. We have 15 lexical items in one clause. Meanwhile, in the congruent form, we have only 6 lexical items in each of the clauses. So we have confirmed the previous literature relating to the characteristics of English written text. What is it? Okay, the lexical density of a clause. We have a clause which is dense. Okay, now let's see the other example. Please study the following clauses. You see, there are many ideas in this clause complex. While checking my students' translation assignment, I come across the reality that some students submit blah, blah, blah. Now, after careful reading, then we have to separate the clause complex into several clauses. And the result is this. We have here the first clause while checking my students' translation assignment, and then I come across the reality that some students submitted a very good result of translated version while others do not. Even both works are acceptable. The idea then becomes stronger when I read many product-oriented research findings and then stating that translation product proved to be very low credibility and accuracy but highly acceptable. Now, these clauses are changed into phrases. And we have, for the first clause, we only have checking my student's translation assignment. This one revealing the reality of differences in the quality of the acceptable students' works. And then this one strengthened by my reading on weird product-oriented research findings, and then about the very low readability and accuracy of translation product with high acceptability. So we can say this one is X and this one is Y. Now we have here the logical relation is X reveals Y. Okay, so X reveals Y. So what is the result of the clause? Here you are. This is the result of the clause. Checking my students' translation assignment reveals the reality of difference in the quality of the acceptable students' works, strengthened by my reading on weird product-oriented research findings about the very low readability and accuracy of translation product with high acceptability. You see here, we have a simple clause. Why? Because we have only one process, that is reveals. Meanwhile, in the congruent form, we have many clauses. And of course, there are many lexical items in the metaphorical clause we have just formed. That's all. I really want you to practice a lot, okay, in order that you can nominalize the clauses into phrases, and you can apply SFL-based metaphor when you write scientific text. That's all. See you in the next video.